The Happy Half Hour is a fun food and drink podcast brought to you by the editors of San Diego Magazine and food critic Troy Johnson. Learn about San Diego's food scene with news about restaurant openings and closings and discussions about what's happening in the culinary world. Get to know a local chef, restaurateur, or farmer each week and find your perfect affordable date night with the regular segment, 2 people, $50. Subscribe to Happy Half Hour wherever you listen to podcasts, or visit sdmag.com/happy.
Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast in partnership with News Radio 600 Kogo. It's a special election night podcast. I'm Scott Lewis, editor-in-chief at Voice. I'm here with Andrew Keats and Sarah Libby, and we are digesting all of the results as they come in. It's the 11 o'clock hour on Tuesday night, so overnight and before you actually start to listen to this, some of this might have shifted. We're trying our best to keep track of it while we talk. For this show, we're going to report what's happened so far, what we're seeing and hearing, and the major decisions voters have made on local races and the measures and where they go from here. We'll be updating, of course, everything as we get more results, and you can follow our summations and stories at voiceofsandiego.org. All right, let's get to it.
The presidential primary, the San Diego mayoral race, congressional races, one major state proposition, and a whole lot of local measures, all part of Super Tuesday in San Diego County. Good evening.
So you're running for mayor.
Yeah, how about that? Who'd have thunk it, right?
Decision Day 2020, San Diegans casting their votes this Super Tuesday. Thanks for joining us for the nightly check-in on this election night.
It is election night, and it is late, but we have some results. And we have some uncertainty, but I know you guys are on the edge of your seat for the biggest news of the night, the biggest result of the night, in my opinion. Poway's construction bond for the Poway Unified School District is going down.
Wow. I thought for sure you were going to say Assembly District 77.
So did I.
Which has no discernible outcome of any significance.
You did a good job delivering on that one.
Yeah.
Poway, no, this is really interesting. We, in 2011, investigated a bond deal that they had made. They borrowed $100 million, and they had to agreed to pay back $1 billion over 40 years. They still haven't even started paying it back.
Why rush?
The notoriety of that situation has haunted the district ever since. It caused all kinds of changes. They put forward this bond measure and really towed the line of legality, educating voters about it. And they've come in, it looks like 47.
People can't see your air quotes when you say educating.
But he did the voice version.
All right.
So anyway, that stood out for me. I know you guys probably aren't as obsessed with that as I was, but that was a pretty interesting result. Okay. Let's get right into it, huh?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
We did a draft the other day of some of the races we were following the most. We'll just start with that framing so far. Wanted to make sure you heard about Poway first, but County District 3, county supervisors, there are 5 county supervisors. We knew that Kristen Gaspar, the incumbent, probably had a good shot of getting to the runoff. So the question was who got in with her, and it looks like it's not 100% certain, but pretty close. Olga Diaz has fallen short of that seat, of that second spot, and Tara Lawson-Reamer looks like she will take it into November.
That does appear to be the case.
Yeah.
Gaspar had a pretty large share of the vote.
Quite large.
I was surprised by that.
She was. You'd have to say it was a good showing for her. She exceeded. For instance, we set our election contest each week. We set the line for that race. She beat that by quite a bit, like 5 points.
Not really. It's going down a little bit. It's at 47.6% right now.
Okay, so it might come right back to the line.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, traditionally the first results are more conservative. More conservative voters are, I guess, more likely to get their act together and put the mail in early.
I think the trend is actually it's just older people tend to vote earlier, and since older people tend to be more conservative.
Got it.
But I think it cuts across partisan lines. It's mostly age is the determining factor.
And so it's not necessarily that these races get more liberal as their counts go on, but that's often a simple way to look at it. And so it would look like maybe Kristen Gaspar's 47.61% might go down, but then Olga Diaz and Tara Lawson-Remer are just a little bit too far apart. Looks like Tara Lawson-Remer has gone. Now, Tara Lawson-Remer, again, represented what we called like that sort of activist side of the Democratic Party, and she's a protest background, and so she will represent. That'll be a fierce ideological battle in November.
Yeah, it's also it seemed pretty clear that Gaspar's campaign wanted to run against Tara Lawson-Remer.
Yes,
they spent a lot of time hitting Olga Diaz,
and the Chamber of Commerce did not want Tara Lawson-Remer to move on.
Yes, it seemed like they would have been happy with either Olga or Kristen. Mm-hmm. I think, so to your point about it being a general rule of thumb that the vote returns get more liberal or left-leaning as the count progresses, the first batch being typically the most conservative. That really is always just easier to read in runoff elections when you have got like a Republican versus a Democrat. It's pretty easy to count on that. It gets really complicated when you're talking like, so a late arriving Democratic vote, does that help Olga or Tara? Who the heck knows, right? You could kind of talk yourself into either direction, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So watch that. That race will be a fiery one. Next one you picked was drafted, I believe, by Andrew Keats. This is the mayor's race. Todd Gloria, as expected. We put the line on that at 40.5%. He's at 39.52%. And again, the question was who would go with him to the runoff election. Right now, Scott Sherman is holding a slim lead for second place. At the time of this recording, he has 26%, and Barbara Bree has 24%, a difference of about 2,500 votes. So that has gotten a little wider as the count has gone, but
emphasis on little.
Yeah, so that could easily swing. I've seen swings that are
Definitely
pretty big.
Yeah, especially given that dynamic we just talked about.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this is a good example where I have no idea what to make of that dynamic because it is not as though Barbara ran aggressively as a Democrat, right? And I don't even know that she was aggressively targeting Democrats. She didn't have the Democratic Party endorsement. She didn't have Labor's endorsement. So for all we know, her mail may have been targeting older Republican voters. It's possible the share of the vote that comes in will just be more and more Todd friendly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And there's two other things. One that hurts Scott Sherman is that he was not on TV in the last few days, and there were a lot of people talking about the lack of TV ads they saw from him while Barbara was.
Right.
And then the other thing, though, that helps him, I think, is that his campaign was backloaded. It was late.
Yeah.
And so a lot of his work messaging came out at the end. So if we're talking about late voters or people who just mailed their ballot in today, who knows how that. But I foresee the next 5 days waiting to see how this comes out, if not longer.
Yeah. So the hackiest piece of punditry in politics is it'll all come down to turnout. But a very close second is it's going to be a long night.
Yeah.
And
that's both true here.
Both of these are true in this case.
So we're the hacks.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next up, I drafted California's Congressional District 53, 53rd Congressional District. So this was retiring Susan Davis, has left that seat open. Sarah Jacobs, who ran for the 49th before, now put in a lot of resources. She's running a very progressive campaign, climate change kind of messaging all over social media, climate change.
A lot about gun control.
Gun control, too. Gun violence prevention.
Oh.
Sarah.
Sorry.
Loaded terminology, Sarah Libby.
And so the question was who would probably make it through after we saw some polls that showed Jacobs in a commanding lead. The question was who would go with her, and Jacobs unabashedly seemed to make a lot of efforts to make sure that the Republicans in the district knew about the Republican Chris Stoddard.
Yeah, so we should try to explain this. It's a little bit hard to explain, but there was some Facebook ads that were essentially acted as though the race were between Sarah Jacobs and Chris Stoddard,
and a mailer too.
Yeah, that as rather than this being a very crowded field with but many people, that this was a simple Democrat versus Republican race, and the framing around Chris Stoddard seemed like something that, say, a Republican campaign might go out of its way to say about a Republican candidate when talking to Republican voters. And so there were these ads that a lot of people were talking about that seemed to be targeting Republican voters to tell them that there was this guy, Chris Stoddard, who is a Republican.
Yeah, and those are the ones from Sarah Jacobs. There was also unmarked ads, mails going to actual Republicans boosting Stoddard. Stoddard is at 13.72% for that runoff seat, and above him is Council President Georgette Gomez. Do not write her political obituary yet. She has a 3.5 point more advantage right now in the getting that spot in the runoff. So that could change again. We don't know how some of this late messaging for the Republican might have affected things, but for now, Georgette Gomez looks like she probably got that second spot, and that sets up a barn burner of a race in November between two very different types of Democrats. As we talked about, Georgette Gomez is backed by Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, obviously progressive left wing of the party, and Sarah Jacobs represents a more center, not center.
See, that's the thing. She doesn't.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know, like policy-wise, how much they would disagree. It's just kind of like background and resume.
Precisely.
It seems like.
Yeah.
That's the complicating factor about the distinction between those two. Is that
It's like Tara Lawson Remer and Olga Diaz, right? It's approach and identity, and
Absolutely.
like protest versus, pragmatism kind of thing. I don't know.
You've put your finger directly on it. Congratulations.
Did I?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good analysis.
All right. After that one, I got to pick again, and I picked Measure C. This was the hotel room tax increase to fund an expansion of the convention center, roads, and homeless services. The 15-year-long effort to get this project done looked like it was in jeopardy. Michael McConnell, an activist, homeless activist, or activist for homeless residents, he spent up to $400,000 of his own money to keep this under 2/3. I was kind of shocked at the initial dump of results for it, but it didn't quite get 2/3, but it's close. 63.35% is what it's at. That is good. That's a really strong showing.
I was surprised by how close they were, too.
Me too.
I saw some of the mayor staffers over at Golden Hall, and they were all pretty surprised.
Yeah. It's doing really well. I actually saw Michael McConnell. I was talking to him, and this was before the first batch of results came in, and already I got the indication that maybe I had misread this race, because he was talking about how at the start the polling was just through the roof on this thing, and it almost, it really had a good chance of passing, and he wasn't sure if he had spent enough to even keep it below 2/3. We had conversation about whether his spending would keep it below 50.
Yeah.
And I think, on the one hand, they're probably pretty happy at 63 and 63.5, give or take. On the other hand, that's enough that you might say that his money did make the difference.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Right?
I think that everybody would acknowledge, just without $400,000 against it, it probably pretty clearly gets over that.
Yeah, I mean, the Voices of the Voters posts that we do are purely anecdotal, but I'm always kind of surprised by the insights that people are able to pull out. And we did have a few people who specifically said, like, well, I was concerned about the lack of accountability and the homeless funding, which is just a piece of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, where else would they be getting that in their heads but his messaging?
Right. So the question now is what happens? Because it's weird for them to outperform what they might have expected and yet still be failing, right?
Right. Yeah,
and so the question now is, obviously it was set up as a citizens initiative precisely for the purpose of arguing in the court of law in some form that it is a legally passed initiative, because of a previous Supreme Court ruling that said that, basically citizens' initiatives don't have to conform to the part of the California Constitution that also includes a provision that they require 2/3 vote to pass special taxes. And so there are other court cases happening. San Francisco, Fresno have court cases of citizens' initiatives that raise taxes that are trying to test this. Some of them actually started collecting the tax and some of them didn't. And so right now we're not quite sure what's going to happen. We asked Lisa Halverstadt to look into it. I think, here's my prediction, if you're listening on Friday.
Years of litigation and a city stuck in purgatory still?
Yes. However,
Thank God.
More immediately, I bet they come out and say, like, major mandate from the voters to raise this tax to fund these things. We're going to work to make sure the courts recognize that. Stay tuned. So.
Well, and every time there's a tax that fails, people say that, right? Because you could fail at 57 and still be able to claim some sort of large mandate.
Yeah.
This is large enough that it won't be totally unwarranted when they make that argument.
Right. All right, coming back around, you picked
Measure A. So I had Measure A, and so this, let's set the table. I think we've had to do this a few times. Let's see if maybe this will be my best go at it.
I don't know, man.
Or your worst.
Or swarm. Maybe
it's already not started well.
Maybe something traumatic will happen to me in the next couple minutes. The county of San Diego has a general plan. It outlines where you can build housing. This measure says anything that doesn't comply with that plan that developers bring forward has to go to a vote of the entire county, as opposed to right now where the county supervisors can approve it.
All right, that was good.
Thanks,
that was
guys.
good.
I'll take that.
All right.
Good job. Wait, let's just add, it's expressly to shut down sprawl development.
And specifically a handful of sprawl projects that have already been in the works in the county for a very long time, some of which are kind of in limbo waiting for what this situation
right.
pretends. And we should also add, I guess, that when projects like this have gone to large votes of the people, they have not fared well.
Right.
More on that later.
Yeah.
Put a pin in that.
Yeah.
So the two things to say about Measure A so far is too close to call, I think. Right? It's right at 50.
Perhaps the closest
one. It seems the yes is ahead, very close. It's 50.8 to no's 49.1. So we'll see where that goes. The margin has been narrowing, so if that continues, it is possible that no overtakes it at some point later this week, probably.
Can we jump
but maybe
in
it
real
holds
quick?
on.
So you talked about the voices of the voters, and this was fascinating. And I talked to other people at Golden Hall tonight at Election Central who had the same insight that a lot of voters seem to have read the language of that and read it when it says allow for voters to make a choice about adding housing in the county as though that meant it was a pro-housing initiative.
Yeah.
And that it would allow more housing, or it would facilitate that. And bottom line is, I think what we gathered is there is 40 people in San Diego who understand Measure A.
Yes.
And looks like 400,000 people will end up voting on it.
Yes.
There was one of these voices of the voters quotes was like, I just wanted to hug this person. Like, I just felt so much compassion. I was like, you are a smart and thoughtful person who is trying your best and being very kind towards your fellow man. And the people in charge of this system are doing you no favors at all about what they're making you decide here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were people who said that they voted for Measure A because they thought it was a good idea to build housing for the homeless in rural areas.
And he was like,
which is not on the table here at all.
I mean, it was such a fascinating thing. He was like, I mean, I know this doesn't apply in the city, but if we can do it in the rural area, that's better than nothing for homeless people. And it's like, wow.
And there were other people who said they voted for Measure A because they want to make sure rents go down, which I just don't see the logic there. And so a lot of confusion about what this is and what it would do.
And so normally when there's confusion, it means a no vote, which might have helped with that. But boy, that as we'll pull out the stock phrase, it's going to be a long night on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a couple of weeks. So that could be one of those. There's a non-zero chance that ends up being decided by like 12 votes or something.
Yes. Yep.
All right. The next one down was Sarah's. What did you learn from Assembly District 77?
You know what?
I'm glad you guys got up early this morning to listen to our podcast. We've got all the pressing breaking news.
The latest on Assembly District 77.
You know what? I stand by it.
All
My
right.
head is held high. No shame or regrets.
Okay, just to explain that Brian Mainshine has been the incumbent in Assembly District 77. He switched parties, went from Republican to Democrat, and now faces a fierce Republican opponent, June Cutter, to represent that northern part of the city and sort of mid-northern part of the county in the Assembly. Used to be a kind of conservative district, now obviously a swing district. And Mainshine is up a little bit, 53 or so.
Yeah, he's up by about 6% right now, which is, I want to say, more than I expected. But again, this is one that won't be determined tonight, and they're both going to head on through to the general. So I guess we can move on to other races.
I know you were waiting for that one.
I was.
So pull your car back onto the freeway.
Yeah.
It's safe to drive again. I know you wanted to hear every last word of that analysis.
Oh, we kid Sarah. That was a good choice. I am interested in how that turns out, that Assembly District.
You don't have to humor me. It's fine. I'm a big girl.
All right, you had another choice after that. You went with Measure B. This was one of those backcountry rural areas, Miriam Mountains. They've been trying to build housing in this area on the I-15 corridor for a long time. This was the latest effort. It went through the county. It was approved, about 2,000 homes. But a local spa raised a bunch of money, has a bunch of money, spent it to get signatures. They forced it, first county ordinance to be forced to a referendum. That was Measure B. If you supported the housing, you vote yes. But a lot of people didn't. 57%, right now 58% no.
Yeah, so I think this one is interesting in the context of Measure A being so close. And obviously people didn't understand what Measure A would do, and they're torn on whether they support it. And that is not the case with Measure B. It's just a straight, do you want this development? And it's a resounding no. And so, I think if Measure A ends up failing, passing, and we do see more and more of these votes on the ballot, this could be a taste of what those challenges will look like for developers. Or
on account of how this turned out, people will just throw in the towel and we won't even see many of those reach the ballot.
That could definitely be true. Kayla Jimenez was up in North County near the Miriam Mountains where this development would go. And I don't know if she spoke to a single voter there who voted yes on Measure B.
Yeah, it's a tough one. There was a really interesting comment we got that sort of shed light on why you might vote against Measure A, which says these shouldn't go to a vote, but still vote against Measure B, against this particular development, that basically you should trust the County Board of Supervisors to make these decisions, but it seems perfectly consistent to oppose an actual development that you don't want. So I don't know.
Yeah, seems fine.
All right, this snaked back around to Andy, who went with the District 7 City Council race. So this was the only City Council race we highlighted. There were a bunch. We can go through some of the interesting results there. This is City Council District 7, which represents the Allied Gardens, Tierra Santa, College area,
Mission Valley,
and Linda Vista. And what did you notice there?
So there was one Republican on the ballot, and this is the district that is represented by Scott Sherman right now. So in terms of seats that Republicans hope to protect from the ascendant Democratic Party, this would certainly be one. And they had consolidated early behind Noli Zosa. He's a local businessman. He was an partner in Dirty Birds, the restaurant chain, and he's on lots of city commissions and that sort of thing. I think the presumption there was because it's been represented by a Republican for a while and he was the only Republican, there was a presumption that he would come in first place. He did not come in first place. So I think this was a very interesting election result. And in fact, if you just do simple math and total up all the Democrats who ran and compare it to Noli Zosa, it's like 70% Democrats.
Wow.
Hold on. Breaking news.
Okay.
Do you mind?
I don't mind.
There has been an update. Measure A is now only 2,500 votes up.
I'm going to need to know the exact number it was before for that to be meaningful.
Well, it was about 5,000.
Oh, well, okay.
So, it's now at 50.3% yes, 49.6% no.
Now, I think that the important thing to focus on here, don't get too lost in the numbers, it's the trend.
Yeah.
And the trend is clearly moving in one direction right now.
Right.
So we were just talking about it might need days. It's possible by the time you're listening to this that that it's flipped and No's ahead.
Yeah. Scott Sherman maintains about the same distance in number 2 in the mayor's race, a little bit wider.
A little bit wider.
Yeah.
So Noli came in. Noli has reached the runoff, but at 30.5%, I don't think that is something that many Republicans who care about City Hall can be excited about. I mean, the math of just adding up all the Democrats is too simple to rely on, but it's also not the craziest thing in the world that you could ever do. And 70% to 30% is overwhelming. Yeah. So Raul Campillo, the Democrat, got the most votes at 35%. Wendy Wheatcroft did very well at 18.6%. So it will be Raul versus Noli in the runoff. And boy, I think the Democrats have to feel pretty good about that as a pickup opportunity. And again, just crazy. District 5, which I didn't draft, but we can talk about it here. Marnie Van Woolpert, this is where Mark Kersey's district, this is the most Republican district on the city council. Marnie Van Woolpert, a Democrat who is a city attorney, Raul Campillo, I should say, is also a deputy city attorney. Marnie Van Woolpert won the most out of that vote over the lone Republican in the race, Joe Leventhal. And so, again, if you add up all the Democrats in that race, it is like an overwhelming Democratic victory. Well, and again, you can't do that. That's not how it works.
Yeah,
that things can change. Yeah. They don't. It's not that simple. I get it. But as far as back of the envelope, quick and dirty election night analysis, it is not that crazy to start imagining whether there will be only one Republican on the city council, or in this case, Kersey would be, one Republican on the city council in 2021.
So we'll be going through the council races over the summer as they've now finally narrowed. All right, California's Congressional District 50. This was my last choice of the draft. Pretty decisive, looks like. When you connect both of the district's parts, there's a part in Riverside County, so make sure you count that. Don't just look at the San Diego County results. But Amar Campa-Najjar, we assumed he would get through. He looks pretty clearly to have gotten through with 34.1% of the vote. So that meant that the race was between Carl DeMaio and Darrell Issa for that second spot in the runoff. And Darrell Issa, former congressman from the 49th Congressional District, looks like he has secured it at 25% to Carl DeMaio's 21.3%. So, yeah. And Darrell Issa tried to make the case. I was on the radio with him on Kogo, and he tried to make the case that he left the 49th district where he used to be the representative because President Trump called on him to serve, right? Not because he was about to get smacked by the Democrats.
Did you let that go?
Huh? No.
You did not?
No, I did let that go because there was like a bunch of people talking. But he also, I did get a chance to ask him.
We should add, that's preposterous.
Yes. No, he clearly left the seat and then much later started pursuing appointed position from the president, which he says he couldn't get through the Senate.
Right.
So anyway, I asked him, I said, what is being loyal to the president? So much about this race between you and Carl DeMaio was who was more loyal to the president.
It was the only factor in the race.
Yeah. And he said, I said, what does it mean to be loyal? Like, would you ever break with him? Under what circumstance would you break with him? And he said to me, he said, "Oh, I'm fiercely independent." Like, oh, okay. Well, came through. So I don't know that he put that in there. And then at one point he said something like, Carl DeMaio called the president a disgusting pig. And I said, well, he was. He was a disgusting.
You said that on the radio.
Yes. Like he said he was going to grab people where they shouldn't. I can't even say what he said. That's how bad it was.
I think.
It's locker room talk.
That's your take on that one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's my take.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway.
I think it was disgusting and piggish.
Anyway, look, it seems pretty obvious that Darrell Issa has the money, the connections, and the shamelessness to just do whatever he had to do to secure that. And Carl DeMaio had many of the same things, but was unable to pull it out. So that'll be a gentleman's duel, I think, in the runoff. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more results and analysis. Stay with us.
I'm Adriana Heldiz, and I'm a producer at Voice of San Diego. When I started working here at Voice, and whenever we hire a new reporter, we get a debrief of the entire region. It's a quick but useful explanation of some stuff most people in San Diego don't know about. Our CEO, Scott Lewis, walks us through things we need to know in order to follow all the in-depth reporting Voice of San Diego does, like how San Diego gets its water, how local government works, why there are different types of schools, and who decides major things that affects us as San Diegans. These things help us understand the bigger picture and the drama that's happening in San Diego every day. And then we realized that everyone else should know this stuff too. So we started a project called San Diego 101. It's a video series that explains it all. Our videos will help you understand how our region works, and you can watch all 5 episodes now at vosd.org/SD101. Again, that's vosd.org/SD101.
Are there any thoughts that we didn't get to?
I had so I went to the Dem party headquarters and the Republican Party headquarters on election night. And one thing that was really jarring to me was seeing judicial candidates get up on stage at the various parties. And like one was literally saying like, "Go Dems," and seems kind of gross.
Yeah.
Seems like maybe you shouldn't do that.
And then the Republican, what was his name? Skeels. He was saying like he's going to use the law from a conservative point of view or something.
Yeah, he was railing against San Francisco judges and saying sanctuary cities are disgusting and I'm going to uphold the immigration laws of this country from a conservative point of view. And again, all of it was very jarring. These are candidates for judicial office.
I've been wondering like when it would they would
also we're in San Diego. Who cares about San Francisco judges?
Yeah, it was just a total conservative red meat talking point.
But you have to wonder like when some of these nonpartisan, like really intensely nonpartisan races are finally going to like somebody's going to disrupt them and force them to be more intensely partisan, and that seems pretty clearly to be happening.
I mean, the way things run on the city council level, I don't understand the value in maintaining the farce that these are nonpartisan races. Right. I mean, who does that benefit?
Yeah,
it's just withholding information from voters.
Right.
All of everything of significance happens in a partisan lens.
Not quite everything. There's a lot like Bree will jump with, or like Campbell will jump with Kate on this project or that project. Stuff.
Oh well, sure. Look. They still. There's only 9 of them. They still are going to work together. It doesn't. Partisanship, as you like to point out, politics is the way we get things done. And it's better than violence. People can continue to work together and all those things, but in terms of like maintaining this fiction that this is that these are not members of a political party, that their campaigns are not funded and staffed by partisans, that there is not a heavy partisan lean to what determines these outcomes. I don't understand the value in it.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Okay, a couple other notes. Remember, there's 5 county supervisors. There's one in the west part or northeast part of the county. That's settled that he's the incoming. He's still there. There's one in the East County. This will represent most of the East County from Poway out all the way. And that race looks like it's going to be between the two frontrunners, Steve Voss, mayor of Poway, and Joel Anderson, they're both Republicans. Joel Anderson has the nod of the Republican Party, though. He's an endorsed candidate. Steve Voss, that could get fierce. Steve Voss, or supporters of him, sent out a pretty sharp mailer against Joel Anderson. Joel Anderson was involved in an altercation with a lobbyist in a bar. He used the term bitch slap, and that made its way to a mailer. So that sort of hint of what that race could look like in the next few months, but two Republicans facing off.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then in the other part of the county, South Bay, we're talking about Greg Cox's district. He's represented for some time. He is termed out. There was a bevy of candidates running to replace him. Nora Vargas and Rafael Castellanos looked like they were in a fierce battle for that second spot in the runoff. Ben Hueso, a state senator, has pretty high name ID, and so looks like Rafael Castellanos, who's on the Port Commission, ran for city attorney. He has advanced and will face Ben Hueso in that South Bay County supervisor seat. Again, another gentleman's duel probably being set up, right?
I think all three of these county soups race have the potential to get pretty ugly.
Oh,
hey, you hear that, people at the city who've been complaining to us day after day for years that we spend way too much time focusing on the city and the county does all these things and we should spend more time working on them and maybe we focus too much on the city. Your time has come. We'll focus entirely on the county for the next 9 months.
All right. Well,
we won't. I'm sorry.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast on News Radio 600 Kogo. To hear the full show, just search for Voice of San Diego in your favorite podcast app or go online at vosd.org/pod. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and Editor-in-Chief. Andrew Keats is our Assistant Editor, and Sarah Libby's Managing Editor, and we'll talk to you next week. 3, 2. Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast, the most popular public affairs podcast recorded in the Bob Nelson Charitable Fund studio at the Voice of San Diego podcast studio in downtown San Diego. Follow all of our coverage with the Morning Report newsletter. Subscribe at vosd.org/morning. We'll be updating everything on social media too, so get our stories on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Voice of San Diego. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and Editor-in-Chief. Andrew Keats is Assistant Editor. Sarah Libby's Managing Editor. This show was produced by Nate John, Adriana Heldes, and Megan Wood. Thanks for listening. Happy election night.